Back to the Global Business Report here on Arise News. All right, we've heard from President Xi Jinping of China. Let's now listen to President Tinubu of Nigeria. His nationwide broadcast addressing Nigerians on New Year's Day. The president highlighted challenges faced in 2023, and having laid the groundwork for economic recovery, has promised Nigerians to accelerate the pace of service delivery across the nation.
Over the past 7 months of our administration, I have taken some difficult and yet necessary decisions to save our country from fiscal catastrophe. One of those decisions was the removal of fuel subsidy, which had become an unsustainable financial burden on our country for more than 4 decades. Another was the removal of the chokehold of few people on our foreign exchange system that benefited only the rich and the most powerful among us. Without doubt, these two decisions brought some discomfort to individuals, families, and businesses. I am well aware that for some time now, the conversations and debate have centered on the rising cost of living, high inflation, which is now above 28%, and the unacceptable high underemployment rate. Dear compatriots, take this from me. The time may be rough and tough. However, our spirit must remain unbowed because tough times never last. We are made for this period, never to flinch, never to falter. The socio-economic challenges of today should energize and rekindle our love and faith in the promise of Nigeria. Our current circumstances should make us resolve to work better for the good of our beloved nation.
All right. President Tinubu, of course, let's highlight some of what he had in his speech here. Electricity supply, simplify tax laws, improve the business environment, cultivation of 500,000 hectares of farmland, and local petroleum refinery, Dango Refinery, Port Harcourt, and so on and so forth. Joining us now from our Abuja studio to discuss further is Professor Uche Uwaleke, Professor of Capital Markets and Director of the Institute of Capital Market Studies at the Nasarawa State University, Keffi. Professor, Happy New Year to you. Thank you so much for joining us. What did you make of the President's speech?
Happy New Year, Rotus. I must say the speech was quite inspiring. Gives one hope. The president, I would say, said the right things to Nigerians, at this time. He recognizes the fact that there is cost of living crisis, the fact that Nigerians are going through tough times, and also recognizes that without power, very little, can be done in terms of electricity, which is why he mentioned the recent agreement with the Siemens and what the plan, that's on ground to strengthen the national grid. There is also the issue of what the government intends to do with respect to agriculture. You just mentioned it, cultivating 500,000 hectares of land for rice, wheat, maize, and the others. Of course, there is also the issue of the ease of doing business, which he recognizes that has to be tackled, particularly with respect to taxes, the work of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy, and tax reforms. He has also promised to ensure that the living wage is paid to Nigerians, this year. And again, the issue of refineries, the Port Harcourt refinery in particular was mentioned, by him. All of this, to ensure, according to him, that the pace of service delivery is, accelerated. And ultimately, he also pledged commitment to fighting, inequality. But again, it remains to be seen how he walks the talk.
Yeah, so on this, we had a special report on the electricity sector, the power sector for Nigeria, and we looked at the fact that Minister Delabo, Minister of Power, had said that the president is unwilling to remove electricity subsidies because he doesn't want to inflict more hardship on Nigerians. I want to ask you how you think we can improve the electricity sector if you still have subsidies in place that are capping the amount of money that at least discos are getting back from those at the end of the value chain. How do you think that can work out?
Yes, but the fact remains that when you want to implement reforms, you don't bring everything, in one plate all at once. The removal of fuel subsidy and the unification of exchange rates, in my view, are already having some, including unintended consequences on the economy. So it wouldn't be proper at this time to also say you're removing, subsidy on electricity. Reforms ideally should be sequenced. I'm sure what the government is trying to do is, to sequence these reforms such that they don't all come, at the same time. In my view, one of the things we can do with respect to electricity is actually to decentralize it. There seems to be so much focus on the national grid, which is also what is mentioned today, Siemens and national grid. It is important that the issue of provision of electricity is decentralized. Let the subnationals also, be involved. I understand, I'm aware that there is an enabling law, before the National Assembly, that can give states or subnationals the power to not only, generate but also to transmit. So it's important that electricity is decentralized if we must achieve a substantial improvement in electricity supply to particularly households and firms in this country.
Professor, can you simplify tax laws and also generate much needed revenue for the nation? As you know, tax to GDP, according to the FIRS, I think they said it rose to about 10.9% or so for 2022, I think 2021, but it is still lower than the average for sub-Saharan Africa, still very low compared to the rest of the globe. As far as you know, of course, about Nigeria's revenue challenges. So is it possible to simplify tax laws and still bring in revenue?
Yeah, absolutely, it is. The tax to revenue, revenue to GDP on the average is about 15% for Africa. And if you remove for sub-Saharan Africa, and if you remove Nigeria, it's about 18%. And the target of the government is to push it from the current less than 10% to somewhere around 15 or even 18%, by 2025. I think it is possible by streamlining the multiple taxes that we have. Now, it's not about raising taxes, but it's about streamlining multiple taxes. It's about expanding the tax base, which I understand is what the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms is currently addressing. And you can't overemphasize the need to streamline taxes. It's in line with promoting ease of doing business. You can't attract foreign investments into this country with the way the multiple taxes are currently being applied. You saw the recent report by the National Bureau of Statistics on the Q3 capital importation report. And what does it say? Capital importation is actually declining. So foreign investments can come into this country when you have that kind of choking taxes, which of course is one of the things the president mentioned in his speech today, removing bottlenecks that impede on doing business in Nigeria, one of which is the case of multiple taxes. So it's possible, Rotus, it's possible to increase revenue through increasing the tax base and also through streamlining taxes. And even by the time you streamline taxes, you even encourage voluntary payment. You see your revenue, tax revenue growing in the process.
Professor, we've Arise News, of course, has been covering the updates from the Dangote Refinery. We were there when the refinery got the first crude shipment. We're now at the third crude shipment, which we reported just on Friday. And the president highlighted that as far as local petroleum refining. Can you speak to the importance of us being able to get that on the ground? The refinery, Dango Refinery said they'll be producing, hopefully diesel by about mid-January, so middle of this month, hopefully. And then we've been getting updates on the Port Harcourt refinery from the NNPCL. So can you speak to that importance as far as what it means to the economy for this year in getting that off the ground?
The importance cannot be overstressed, Rotus. A situation in which you spend as much as 34% of your forex, importing petroleum products, of course, speaks a lot on the pressure that we are having today in the forex market. So if we are able to produce much of what we are importing, locally, either coming from Dango Refinery or from the Port Harcourt Refinery, or even from other modular refineries, that are expected to be up and running this year, you can bet that the demand pressure in the forex market will, significantly reduce. So it's a welcome development, and it's something that the government should seriously pursue, particularly the issue of the Port Harcourt Refinery. We had expected the refinery to have commenced operations as earlier promised in December, but all that we hear is that what they only did was mechanical. The word they used, mechanical completion. So we hope that before the end of 2024, all our refineries should be working, including that of Dango Refinery.
All right, Professor, in a minute or less than a minute, if you can, what's your outlook for the Nigerian economy in 2024? How do you see things playing out?
Well, I want to be optimistic, but certain things in the budget that has just been passed is, still gives me concern. If you look at the allocation that has been done for a recent one for National Assembly, for example, you find them allocating things like 3 billion naira is allocated for a car park, for Senate, 3 billion for House of Reps, another 4 billion for Recreation Center. So these are things that, in my view, can wait. These are things that are not of priority, at this time. Imagine having 10 billion naira just for, things like that. So it's important that in spending, we have to subject all our spending to that principle of, public spending, which is maximum social welfare. The allocations that we find in the budget today, in my view, do not, a number of them do not, cannot stand that test. The other thing also has to do with the borrowing. The borrowing. Remember, the National Assembly also approved that the government takes about $7 billion, although part of the 2022-24 medium-term expenditure framework. You also have a case of securitizing outstanding ways and means there. Now, what that tells you is that even towards the end of the last administration, a lot of borrowing was going on, which was why I want to recommend here that we can look at what Brazil did also to solve some of these problems, which is the fact that in 2010, Brazil had a fiscal responsibility law, which stipulates that within 6 months to the end of your tenure, a government is not expected to contract new loans. If we can, adopt that here in Nigeria, I think it will go a long way. So that when you are winding down, if your tenure is coming to an end, you're not expected to contract new loans. The loan that the government has now been asked to borrow, authorized to borrow, the $7 billion was signed. We understand it was signed on 15th of May. It was signed just a few days to the end of the administration. So some of these are things we need to look into, as we move into 2024 and as we, implement the 2024 budget.
Professor Uwaleke, Professor of Capital Markets and Director of the Institute of Capital Market Studies at the Nasarawa State University. We thank you so much for giving us your outlook for 2024. We'll see how things go. And Happy New Year to you once again. Thank you so much for joining us.